Welcome to, we're going to host and configure a WordPress website. My name's Dante St. James, and thank you for joining me this morning. This is a repeat of one that we did very, very recently that had a bit of recording issues. So I wanted to be able to do this again so we could record it nicely to go back onto YouTube a little bit later on. If you're joining us live on Zoom right now, thank you for joining us. If you're joining on YouTube after the fact, thank you too for joining us. So let's get underway and get this going so you can see how to install and get the best out of a WordPress site very early in the game as you're starting to build it. I want to state here that the money you save by doing it yourself is time you've had to spend. So if you're the kind of person who has a bit of time to spare and you want to be able to learn this for yourself and make sure it's something you can do for yourself, by all means, get in there and start doing your WordPress website. It'll be a great way for you to learn something new. But if you're someone who's very, very shy about technology and isn't very good at taking on learning for new technologies, maybe one of the do-it-yourself, build-it-yourself web platforms could be better. For now, though, we're talking about WordPress and getting you underway with that. What we're going to cover today is the difference between the .com and .org versions of WordPress. There is a bit of a difference there, and I'll explain that in a second. Choosing a web host, which is very important because the wrong web host can actually cause you a stack of problems. So a lot of people will go for where they registered their domain name, which is not always the best place to go. We'll look at installing WordPress and some of the things, the plugins that I think are absolute essentials, as well as the theme I think is probably the easiest one to start building from. And we'll look at how to configure it so that you can make sure it's secure, it's easy to update, and you've got everything you need with that. And what I'm going to offer you too at the end of this too is the chance to have a free Divi theme plus the code that will allow you to upgrade that to the full capability with all the built-in sub themes that come with it. So that'll be a little bit later on. So please let me know if you'd like that at the end of the webinar so I can get those to your email address. First of all, this is brought to you by Business Station and the Digital Solutions Program, which is across Queensland, Northern Territory and Western Australia from the Australian Small Business Advisory Services Program from the Australian Government. So thank you to the Digital Solutions Platform and Business Station for making this possible. Secondly, you can watch this again on YouTube later on. It's through the Business Station channel, or you can find it through my own channel as well. I've got about 150, 160 different videos there you can watch. Business Station beat me though. They've got all the advisors in there. So it's probably 400 to 500 in there now. So have a look, see if there's something which really appeals to you and enjoy yourself. A little bit about me. My university education, particularly in marketing and business information systems, was in 2013 to 2016 through the University of New South Wales, Sydney. Also done extensive certifications through the Chartered Institute of Marketing, TAFE, New South Wales, and Australian Computer Society's Skillsoft program as well, which I've done a lot this year in particular. I'm a certified professional for LinkedIn marketing, for Facebook lead training, which is one of my big roles that I work with Facebook Australia and New Zealand with, as well as being a digital marketing associate, media planning and media buying professional, creative strategist, and media science professional as well with Facebook. My own business is a click starter, my own training company, DanteStJames.com, and my recent Cellular One, which was the rebirth of an old brand from the 90s in Australia as a mobile phone reseller. So I've got that just sort of bubbling away and starting its way to something new as well. Enough about me. More about why you're here, to learn more about WordPress and how you can install your own WordPress and I guess make it an easier process than what it may have been painted for you in the past. Now, the two WordPresses are WordPress.com and WordPress.org. Now, for you, they may not look any different. They may not work much differently. They're a little bit different, though, in the way they work. But the way to tell it apart is WordPress.com is WordPress's paid hosted service, while WordPress.org is the software that runs that. And that's something you can download or install yourself for free on your web hosting, which probably isn't free. So one is you host it on your own web hosting, or the other one is you host it on WordPress itself. Now, there's not a huge amount of differences. The WordPress.com version includes your hosting. So what you're paying WordPress every month, about $14 a month, that includes WordPress. It includes access to all the free and and easy to install plugins and themes as well. It often will include your domain name. So if you pay a certain amount to WordPress.com, they will also include your domain name. That said, though, you can't put a .com.au through their own domain purchases. You'd have to purchase that elsewhere and work on that separately. It often includes support. Now, not every level deserves the 24/7 in-depth support, because obviously you've got to pay. More you pay, the more support you access. And you don't have to do your own security updates. This is one of those big things that I think WordPress site owners forget they have to do. And a lot of their web developers don't tell them they've got to do, is that every WordPress site has themes and it has plugins that help extend the functionality and the ability for you to display your website. When you're on your own hosting, those things are essentially up to you or your web host, or your, sorry, not your web host, your web designer, depending on the arrangements you've got with them. So if you're paying an annual fee or a monthly fee to a web designer to keep those things up to date, then they'll be doing it for you. Most people don't do this, though. They just don't know that it's something they need to do. In WordPress.com, WordPress handles those updates for you. So you never get behind because they're always keeping it up to date. But as I said earlier, it does involve some kind of monthly subscription where you do need to pay WordPress a certain amount to have that hosting. I'll just add now here too, if you've got any questions along the way, because this is live on Zoom, not live on YouTube, unfortunately, but live on Zoom, please feel free to post your questions and they will pop up on my screen. I'll be able to look at those for you. At the same time, though, if you are on YouTube, please just whack those comments down below. And if you're in YouTube too, a subscription to the channel would be, it'd make me speechless. It'd be awesome if you could do that, because I'd really love to see you show up as a new subscriber on the YouTube channel. The other version of WordPress, though, this is the one you host yourself. So you buy your own web hosting, you use your own web hosting, you use your own domain name, and then the support you get isn't paid. It isn't something you have access to. It is, coffee break there, it is community support only. So it's to do with community forums and knowledge bases and going and doing your own research with support and those people who are there to, I guess, provide their support for you. But you do have to run your own security updates. Now, there are little plugins that will help you to manage that and make sure you're doing them automatically. WordPress does have an automatic plugin update. But if you've had a web designer who's designed this site for you, then they may have bought premium plugins and premium themes that require you to then go off and get your own logins and accounts with those companies so that you can maintain your site looking the way it does and maintain its safety by having the latest versions of that software on your website. Now, of course, most web designers, they have this thing where they just don't bother telling you this, particularly if you've gone and got this offshore. They will often over-engineer, over-design, and over-install paid plugins and paid themes, which will make it really difficult for you to update. It's not just overseas. Tons of Australians do it as well. I tend to just do everything off the shelf, and anything that requires like a paid update, like Divi, for instance, which is the theme set that I use, I just provide those details. I buy it on a lifetime unlimited license so that I can share that with my clients. And then I provide all the ongoing security updates every morning for free, because I've got 600 websites that I'm hosting at the moment for customers all over Australia and New Zealand and Indonesia. And it's unreasonable to expect them, as just everyday small businesses, to understand the depth of what they've got to go into with cybersecurity, updating themes and updating plugins and updating WordPress. And then, things go wrong, what do they do? Whereas I just absorb that for them, because that's something I press one button every morning and everything updates. So there are no WordPress costs with this particular version of WordPress. So it's not going to cost you anything to use WordPress. The costs come in terms of the web hosting, and then secondarily with any sort of paid plugins or paid themes you may happen to be using. So if you were going to choose a WordPress web host, who would you choose? And we're just going to assume that we're not using the WordPress.com, which is the self-hosted one. We're looking at one where you have to go out and get your own hosting. So what would you use? Where would you go when it comes to hosting for WordPress? In my experience across probably dozens of different web hosting platforms since about 1996 has been that I've got a very, very strong opinion about who I think is the best service, the best capabilities, and the ability to work with WordPress. For me, you want to find something which is tuned specifically for WordPress. They often have a WordPress management tool or a WordPress, some sort of a special piece of software within their hosting, which is especially made for handling WordPress. After all, WordPress is the #1 web platform on the planet. It's got more on it than almost all the others combined. So it's now, approaching around about that 45% of the internet is using WordPress. It's kind of ridiculous how dominant they've become. So those management tools are very common in most really good WordPress web hosts, using things like Softaculous and installatron. They're two software installation suites. They'll not just install the software of WordPress, but keep it up to date for you and prompt you when things within your WordPress, such as plugins and themes, are out of date. So it gives you an option to be able to handle some of that stuff yourself without having to know much about the coding or anything about the technical side of installing and maintaining that sort of stuff. You'll also find too that really good web hosts are up to date with their PHP versions. What is PHP? PHP is a scripting or a programming language that runs WordPress. So let's just say, for instance, you've got a mobile phone that runs a thing called iOS, and then iOS runs on a port of something called Linux. So PHP is like the Linux that's behind iOS on your iPhone that then runs your iPhone. It's a very fine piece of software that gets updated quite frequently. And I find that the cheaper, nastier web hosts, they don't tend to update that version very frequently. And you often miss out on some of the advantages of having an up-to-date version of PHP, which includes having a faster website, which is what we definitely want when we're working with Google, and also having a website where all the things that run on the website run so much more effectively and efficiently and don't get caught, unable to update because you have the wrong kind of version of PHP. The other thing that all of these really good web hosts will have, and most web hosts will have, is at least something called cPanel or their own version of something that works like cPanel. So some of these web hosts I'm about to look at, they do have cPanel. In fact, just about all of them except one has cPanel that runs it. And cPanel is a control panel essentially for all your web hosting. It's really important to understand how cPanel works because it's where you might run things like setting up your own email addresses or backing up your website every day so that you can roll back to a previous version if you had a mess. I had a client this morning who hosts, not with me, but with one of my recommended web hosts, and she made a bit of a mistake, deleted her homepage. Thankfully, though, we're able to work really easily with her because she uses one of the most recommended web hosts that I have. So it's very easy to roll back to the time before she made that change because they do daily updates. So just roll back to last night's version and voila, we've got a refreshed and fixed website. So who are my #1, my top tier web hosts that I recommend? Through my own experience, Venture IP is actually a service that I even resell. I like them so much, I resell them. That's where I put my clients. I use the Synergy Wholesale, which is the parent company that does the wholesale version of Venture IP. But for a small business, Venture IP, whilst it may cost a little bit more than going with Crazy Domains and GoDaddy and all those guys, this service is infinitely better, more reliable, with much better support when things go wrong. And you'll find, though, that things don't tend to go wrong. Venture IP are very helpful, and they were able to help out that client of mine this morning. Thankfully, they then said, "Oh, actually, you're with one of our resellers, and if you like, he can probably get this done even quicker for you." So that was a really good service for them to be part of. Secondary is my second one, which is SiteGround, which they're almost a tie for first, really. These are two specifically good services because they have, Venture IP has a thing called the WordPress Toolkit, and SiteGround has its own WordPress tools as well. So SiteGround is very much tuned for working with WordPress. It's a very, very established, high service, international brand when it comes to hosting WordPress and Joomla websites. Joomla I won't go into, but WordPress, obviously, you want someone who knows WordPress, understands WordPress, so when you need the help, they're there. Digital Pacific is an Australian company, like Venture IP is an Australian company. Digital Pacific also is an Australian web host, which means, #1, that Venture IP, they actually have their web hosting located in Sydney, so that you know that your website exists within Australia, which if you're trying to get things like government contracts and military contacts, those kind of things are very important to them. Digital Pacific is also located in Sydney. And just recently, in the last sort of 12 months, SiteGround is using Google's cloud services, so Google Cloud hosting, which means that they also now have their hosting located in Sydney, which I believe they've also got one coming up in Melbourne very shortly as well. So a key feature of all these is that their servers are actually located here in Australia, which is so important when it comes to speed, when it comes to the relevance of being ready for Australia's internet architecture, and also for the fact that you're going to get Australian support. Venture IP and Digital Pacific are both Australian support. SiteGround, I believe they have their support out of Singapore. So these are places which are commonly able to be communicated clearly with, especially Venture IP and Digital Pacific. Very big fan of all those companies on the screen right now. Your second tier is the people who I just don't go to quite the same level as recommendation, but they're okay. So DreamHost out of America will host you in Virginia and I think Oregon call center, so data centers. So they are good. They are very, very fast, and particularly good if you're looking to an international an international presence for your brand. So for instance, if you're wanting to sell to people in Europe and America, then that's an excellent idea for you to do. DreamHost is recommended by Neil Patel, who's one of the biggest SEO specialists on the planet. So he's a very big fan of that, but he is also very, very US focused. HostPapa is another one. Now, this is one of the cheaper ones around, and they're actually surprisingly good. I don't recommend them so much for their WordPress toolkit because I don't think they really have one, but they can handle WordPress very well, and they are tuned their web hosting to be able to handle WordPress very well. WP Hosting is an Australian web hosting company that's specifically tuned to WordPress. They're a little bit cheaper. I haven't used them before myself, but I do have some really good feedback about them, I've heard, and also that they have Australian support as well. So it's not quite that 24/7 thing. It'll be a business hour support, but it is free support as long as you're a paying person on their platform. A2 Hosting is good, for instance, for agencies, really, because agencies will resell space on their servers to their clients. It's also very fast, also based out of Australia, not Australia, out of America, and I believe Singapore. And then Hostinger is a Singapore-based host. Why would I recommend someone who's based in Singapore? Singapore is close to Australia and has excellent internet connectivity between Singapore and Australia. And with two new major networks actually bringing cables into Darwin from Singapore, you're going to see this become even better. So those lightning speeds that you get from Australia will also be lightning speeds that you're getting from Singapore as well. There's also a possibility that hosting in Jakarta in Indonesia would be good as well. For now, let's just host ourselves in Australia, save ourselves any trouble, and keep ourselves within Australian rules, Australian law, and Australian customer service expectations as well. It's really important when you get Australian hosts because they do know how to treat people right when it comes to technical support. And particularly if you're not as confident as others with this, you'll need decent customer support. Please do not go and host your WordPress site with any of these people. They are not tuned for WordPress. Their setups are not particularly good for WordPress. What they are very, very good at, though, is domain names and running their own web builders. GoDaddy, NetRegistry, and Crazy Domains have their own web building software built into their platforms, which are very good and very fast, but they're not WordPress. They're not going to give you that sort of thing where everyone can, like, there's tons of people who can support it. They're not going to give you all the configuration variables that WordPress gives you, and the ability to take on tons of themes and plugins and functionality that WordPress offers you. So NetRegistry are one of the worst web hosts I've ever had the displeasure of having to work with. I've had to rescue people from them before. Crazy Domains, much the same. They are very bad at updating their PHP, so they get left behind very quickly, and the web hosting itself is rather slow. Same with NetRegistry. And GoDaddy just isn't made for WordPress. They have a paid WordPress product. The problem is it's just terrible. It's not great. It's not got a good toolkit with it. It's just not tuned for it. If you have to choose between those three, GoDaddy is probably the best of a bad bunch. But whatever you do, please avoid NetRegistry like the plague and Crazy Domains, because they are terrible, terrible website hosts for WordPress particularly. So let's stop talking about this and actually go into looking at what WordPress is going to look like. So I'm just going to go here. I've gone to reduce this. I'm going to go into my cPanel that's with Venture IP. So this is one of my very many accounts I've got with Venture IP and their parent company, Synergy Wholesale. So when you log into your hosting accounts, it looks a little bit like, there's their website. Here is inside it. So I'm going to go into the cPanel. So let's get out of there and I'll log into the cPanel again so you can see what it does. Let me just refresh that. So probably have to log back in again because I hadn't been in for a while. There we go. So we've got our cPanel. Now with this cPanel, I'll remove this little alert so we don't need to see it. You can see that there's lots of different options you can go with. You can look at your email accounts. You can look at forwarding your email addresses, setting up encryptions, calendars, whatever you need to do to run the ins and outs of your web hosting. For those who are more advanced users, your file manager, it could be very important for you to go and look at, or things like running your backups. So you can run a backup or have a backup run for you each night. Now, Acronis on Venture IP will always run your backups overnight anyway. So you'll very, very simply and easily get to have that. But what I really like about Venture IP is that they have this little thing here, the WordPress toolkit. They've got their very own one. So there's other things they use for installing software like installatron and Softaculous, which will allow you to install WordPress, but they've got their own built-in WordPress toolkit. So you want something like this. So if I click on the WordPress toolkit, what it's going to bring me up is a list of all the different WordPress installations that are currently on this web server that I've running. So we've got a few in there: Cyclone City, DTix, Haymark, Arrow Mowing is a new one on there. These are none of my clients. I've resold this space to other people, so that's their clients. What I can do though, I can install something new on here. So if I go install, as I can say, like, what domain do I want to install it on? If there's a domain name that I've got applied to this server, which one do I want? So I'm going to install this to clickstarter.com, clickstarteraustralia.com, because that's definitely mine. So let's have a look at that. clickstarteraustralia.com. And for the sake of hiding it on the internet, I'm going to put this in a folder that's not the main folder. So if you go to clickstarteraustralia.com, I'm going to put it in the dev folder of clickstarteraustralia.com. Let's give it a website title. So we're going to call it test website for digital solutions. If I can spell correctly, that would be very helpful. That's terrible. You're trying to do something live and you're just absolutely atrocious with your spelling. Now, it's got the option for me to then include a plugin or theme sets for WordPress. So this is then going to install, if I look at this, the Lightspeed cache, which is something which speeds up WordPress. I'm going to take that off because I don't actually use Lightspeed cache, but you may want to use it. I use other things to speed it up. You may also want to change the language you're running on here. So at the moment, it's got English US. I might run that as English Australia. The current version of WordPress obviously is that one, so we don't want to change that. And the administrator settings, I'm just going to use these because let's have a look at what that password is and save it. I'm just going to call it maybe Decent James for me, just so I can log into it. I'm going to copy this so I can use it to log in. And then the email, I'm going to make go to my Gmail address. So that can be whatever email address you want it to be. This administrator is going to be what is your login for when you're going to log into the back end of WordPress. So when on the back end of WordPress here, we're in the back end of Venture IP. And then once we get all this set up, it's going to be very, very quick. Look at this. We very, very quickly install WordPress so we can go in there and do all the things we need to do. But I did need to take down that password and username just so that I can get into it before. So down the bottom right-hand corner, you can see it's now installing WordPress on this server. So it's just slowly going about. That usually happens pretty quickly, where I find all of a sudden it's just going to go whiz and just jet through all those options very, very quickly. I'm going to jot down that email because I really that password, so I don't want to lose that. And then go back. Here we go, 50% completed. It's going to be 100% before we know it. And then it'll come up and give me a display on screen of where to go to get to the front and to the back of that WordPress website now that it's been installed. So waiting for that 50%, it's a little bit slower than usual today. Might be because I'm on camera and on screen and got my lights and all that set up in my my virtual environment here that's taking a lot of internet capacity. Or it could just be because this takes a bit of time. It's a big lot of files that have to be installed. So once this is installed, 75% now, I'll then be able to go into the front of the WordPress website and to the back of the WordPress website. It'll give me the option to go to both of those. And then if I ever sort of lost my access to the back end of WordPress and couldn't log in, forgot the password, forgot the username, all that sort of stuff, then I'd be in a position where I could go into my web hosting and I can reset that access. So I wouldn't be stuck unable to get in there. I'd still be able to get in there, much the same as what these ones. If I needed to get into these ones here, I can go over to these settings over here and update things that let me get in. So I'll be able to go and refresh the site. I can go in and check in the file manager and reset a particular file that allows me to get into the site, or I can go in through the security panel up here at the top, and I can then go into that website as a master controller and be able to access everything I need to, and then probably change my username and password in the site so I'll be able to get in again. All right, so it's nearly 100% completed now. So just waiting for that to complete so that it'll then throw up those details for me and I'll know how to get into my new WordPress website. So I won't refresh this screen just yet. I'm just going to wait for it to do its job so that I can do this properly and not be rushing it along and cause something to break down. And that's really important to do when you're running any sort of WordPress installers. Let the process finish in its own time, because you popping in and refreshing screens and resetting things to go again can actually break it. And beyond that, also use up your time in your space in your web hosting. So you might actually have doubled up on all those files, because it can be hundreds of megabytes of files. If you double that, you could be into gigabytes. So you don't want to use up more space than you have. So now it's prompting me to say that it's complete. I can go and install a bunch of plugins that will, I guess, make the experience of managing the website a little bit easier from your Venture IP end. So let's have a look at those plugins and see what they are. So a few plugins and choosing a theme. Now, I don't want to choose a theme. I usually skip ahead here because I'm going to install my own stuff. So what it's done is installed the default theme, which is this one over here, the 2021 theme, which is the default theme for it. Now, it's got a bunch of little things in here. We can say, do we want password protection, debugging, any of these kind of things? Not really. Don't really need any of these things. But what we might need is to maybe install plugin updates, because the plugins are not currently up to date that are in there. We're going to see all that in a second once we get in there. So it's giving me the option now to look at all this. I can log into the site from the back end, set it up, or go into the site's front end just by going to where it actually is located. So I'm going to go log in, because this is going to take me into the back end of my new WordPress website. That's going to give me my username and password. If it hasn't decided, it's already going to let me in without those, because it is a brand new site. Yep, it's let me straight in. And so it's got now the ability for me to now set up all the things in the back of the site that I want to use. To go to the front of the website, I'll just pop over here and click on, hover on where it says test website and go visit site. So usually what I do is right click on that and open in a new tab. And I can see this is what the front of my website looks just for now. So obviously we need to do a bit of work to make it look like a real website. First thing I'm going to do is dismiss this, because I don't really need it. Now what I'll do is install a bunch of plugins which for me make it a much more sensible and safe website. So at the moment, there's some updates are already running. So it's saying, look, I need to run an update. So the Akismet anti-spam plugin is important for you if you are someone who is running a blog with comments on it. Otherwise, if you don't have a blog with comments, you don't actually need it. It can be removed. So I'm just running the update now to make sure it's safe. And now that that is just about over, and all of its translations are done, I can now go and see that there's nothing that needs to be updated in there. So back to my dashboard. Now I'm up to date with my plugins. What do I want to install? Well, the first thing that I want to install is it's something called Jetpack. Now, Jetpack under plugins on the left here, I'm going to click on that, and it gives me the option to look at the things that are already there. So we've got this Hello Dolly, which is a menace of a piece of software that it's not required. So I'm going to delete that because I don't need it. What I'm going to do now, even though I updated this, I do not need Akismet. Nobody needs Akismet if they're not running any kind of comments on their blog. So I'm going to delete that one as well. So I've currently got no plugins. The other place I'm going to look at is themes. So themes are under appearance and then themes. Themes are what makes your website front end look like this. So you control what your theme is going to be. First thing I do with cleaning up is get rid of these themes I don't need. So this one over here, the 2019, delete, don't need it. get rid of it. It's just not necessary to have all this extra bloat. And the 2020, getting rid of that one as well. Don't need either of those themes living in there because I'm not going to use them. And they're just one extra piece of software that has to be updated every time we work with your WordPress website. The less things you have to update, trust me, it's going to be a whole lot less hassle when you start working with it later. Now, I did say that once I've got the themes, I'm going to go back to my plugins and look at the ones I've already got installed, which is none for now. I'm going to add a new one called Jetpack. Now, Jetpack is from the makers of WordPress Automatic. So it's from them themselves. They've made it themselves, and it's designed to give you some of the functionality. So I'm just going to install that now. Some of the functionality that the WordPress.com paid WordPress platform has. They figured that it's much better to have some of those security updates and speed updates offered for people, even if they don't pay, across all kinds of WordPress, because it allows you to then have a safer site. So now that that's installed, I need to activate it, hit activate. And because I've got a WordPress.com set up in, like, I've got a WordPress.com free account, and you need to get one of these as well. It's just a free account with WordPress.com. When it goes to set up Jetpack, it's going to say, okay, you need to log into your WordPress.com. In my case, I'm already logged into mine, and it's going to recognize that and ask if I want to associate this particular website with my WordPress.com account. I do, because that's where hundreds and hundreds of WordPress sites live and are connected through to me. So I'm waiting for that to now recognize that, oh yes, we know who you are. You're the guy who has that particular WordPress.com account. And I'm going to approve that linking. Now, your case, it won't say any of this. It'll actually ask you to log into WordPress or to set up a WordPress account. That's okay. It's free. What happens though, that once I approve this, it's going to go through, and once you set up your section, it's going to ask you to do a lot of paid things. Jetpack is a way that WordPress makes money, but you do not have to have a paid version of it. In fact, just about all the best features are free. You don't have to have any kind of paid version with it. So as it goes through this process, it goes in the Jetpack and it says, oh, look, $7, 50 a month, or $17. Keep scrolling down until you get to the free option. Down, down, Jetpack free. There we go. Not CRM, you don't need that yet, just Jetpack free. So I'm going to start for free. And it's going to install things like security protection. It's going to install things that will speed up the site by installing your website across the content delivery network of WordPress, which allows you to be the fastest to load in any country in the world that has WordPress's servers, and Australia is one of those too. So we're going to go, okay, it's a business website, because after all, you're a small business. Let's select that one and continue. Now it's going to ask you if you want a plan to do with backups and security. We don't. We're going to decide later. And would you like to enable downtime monitoring? So it tells you by email whether your site goes offline. You do want this. So let's say enable downtime monitoring. Then it asks you, would you like to display related posts at the bottom of your content? So it's the bottom of your pages, the bottom of your blog entries. You can have it so it automatically picks related content. Now, I don't really want that now. We can actually turn that on later. We don't need it right now. Now what it wants to do is offer you Creative Mail, which is an internal, it's like a MailChimp, but within your site. Creative Mail is actually quite expensive and not necessary if you've already got something like MailChimp. So I'm going to go not now. But the site accelerator is absolutely necessary. This is a great piece of service from them that allows you to significantly speed up your site. I've done a lot of site speed tests through Google to actually prove that this really does work well. So let's just go enable site accelerator. So it's saying, yes, you've accepted these two things. That's all good. So they're the things you need. We don't have to go any further. You've already selected everything you want. Let's pop back out of Jetpack and now go to dashboard. Back in our dashboard, we've got nothing really except for this new little thing here, this Jetpack thing. So it's just a traffic measuring, really. It just measures how much traffic is coming to your site. The thing with all these little things in here, if you're easily overwhelmed by too many options, just close them all. Just by this little arrow on the right, just get rid of them because you don't need them. At a glance, don't really need that. Or drag them out of the way so you don't really need them. The activity, don't really need to know because you know what you've done your activity. At a glance can go over here as well. The stats from Jetpack I like seeing, and the site health status, because they prompt me to let me know if there's things I need to do. Now, when you're first setting up your website, you won't have anything in here because you've got no traffic and you've got no work that you've done on your website. So that will come up in the next 24 hours, or it'll start to give you some of that information. So in the dashboard now, we've installed Jetpack. We've now, we haven't chosen a appearance or a theme yet, but just a couple of other things I think might be really good to install, which are free and really good for you to get yourself sort of understanding how WordPress works. I'm going to go back into my plugins and I'm going to go add new. And what I'm going to do in here is add in a couple of plugins that I think are really good for you. The first one is called Yoast. Now, Yoast is a good plugin for rewriting how Google will see your website and its pages. So Yoast is spelled like toast. So let's get Yoast. It comes up and says, oh yes, here it is, SEO from Yoast. Install it. And this will allow us then to be able, now this is one of the very basics, and there's a lot of arguments out there to which SEO plugin is the best one of all. Really, they do much the same stuff, like from one thing to the other. This one's fine. So what we can look at this one, we're going to activate it. It then also gives us the option to use, paid versions of Yoast. Honestly, the paid version doesn't do that much more. What Yoast will allow you to do now it's installed is when you go to your blog pages or your content pages, it will give you a rating on the readability and the likelihood of that particular page being found in Google. So it gives you then recommendations to say, hey, you've written this in the passive voice, you may want to use this in the active voice. Or you've used your sentences are too long, you need to cut them down to less than 20 words per sentence. It'll give you really good pieces of advice based upon that. And if you select what the word or phrase is that you want to be found for on your website or on that specific page, it'll give you then all the things you should do to make it better for your chances on Google to be found for that particular phrase. At the basic level, Yoast is free. You don't really need to do much with it. And once we've installed it, that's pretty much all you have to do until you start building pages of content. So I've got Yoast. I've got Jetpack installed. There's not a lot else I need to install because a lot of the features are what we would usually use, like forms or page layouts are all coming in our theme that we're going to install. And the theme that I'm going to install is called Divi. Now, why do I use Divi? Simply because it's the easiest and simplest of the page builders that allows you to build pages the way you want. So you can use any theme you like. You can go into your appearance and into themes and look up a whole lot of things being recommended by different people. So I can go and add a new one and it will give me a library of lots of different free themes and paid themes that you can use. And there's some great ones in there. Like for instance, this one over here, Nev, is great. Hestia is another one, which is great. You've got Generate Press and tons of extra ones. You can choose if you like the look of them. What I do is I use Divi simply because it allows me to create very similar sites to all of these without having to lock myself into one. I can have lots and lots of different layouts or lots and different ideas of different pages within Divi. So how do I then work with Divi? Divi is something that I download from a place called Elegant Themes. If you're on this webinar, you get, unfortunately, I can't offer this for people on YouTube, but on this webinar, I can offer you this for free. I can give you the Divi plugin and also give you the code that gives you all the premium themes inside it. So I'm going to upload it. I've previously downloaded Divi before. Just going to look for where I've downloaded it. Here it is, Divi zip. So install it. And then once it's installed and uploaded, it's going to ask me if I want to use this as the default theme for my website. So uploading, installing, packaging, unpackaging, and putting all that. So it's now said it's now successfully installed. If I go activate, you'll now notice that if I refresh the front page of this, so the front page of the site currently looks like this. If I refresh it, it's going to look a little different. Straight away, it looks very different. But this is obviously not what you want your website to look like. You're more likely to want your website to look like one of those themes that we were looking at before, right? So in there, we've got this ability to do this. Now, I'm going to also install my, I need to open up a fresh window. So I will be able to get hold of my Elegant Themes, what do they call it? Elegant Themes, lost the word, code, which allows me then to allow to have all the premium extras that are going to be loaded in there. I'm just waiting for this to come over here and load. So I go into my themes. You can't see what I'm doing, by the way. I'm on another window. And I'll get that theme so I can go and add in all the features that Divi will allow me to have. So I've got that code now. So inside Divi, I can go into down bottom left here, all the options to do with Divi. And this is like my Divi dashboard. So I can load up my logo for my website here. I can then in my updates, put in what my code is. So you can't see this at the moment because it all gets hashed out. If I save that, it's going to accept that and allow me now to do things like update the theme. So the first thing I'll notice when I go into the themes is going to probably tell me that I need to update this theme and it's out of date because it's back from, yeah, there you go, new version available. So because I've now added those details, I can update that theme without having to log in and do ridiculous things. So now we're updated, we're updating. It's going to give me the latest version of this theme and I can start now to build my pages out. So it's now updated. So what I want to do is go to pages. In pages, there's a couple of things already there. Don't need any of those. So I'm just going to delete them because I really don't want that sample page because it's not a page that I want to work with. And I'm going to go add new. Let's get rid of that ghost prompt because that's annoying. Add a new page and call it home. So I go in here. It's going to say, oh, what do you want to do with this page? I'll either guide you through it. I want to go home and I want to use the Divi builder. So we go, oh, you want to use Divi? Okay, you may want to click that a couple of times so it goes in correctly. Notice how at the bottom, you've got the Yoast SEO panel. So this is going to read the page and you're going to be able to see what the focus key phrases and all that information is you need to go in there. So now that I'm starting to build this page, I can either use the tour or I'm going to go start building. Now, in amongst this page, I've got three options. I can build a page layout from scratch, which is often what I do these days because I now know how to do that. I can use a pre-made layout or clone an existing page. Now, cloning an existing page would be great if we had a page to clone. So once I've built the first page, I usually then clone it. So I've got all the same little features coming through, so I don't have to do it again and again and again. But what most people will do is use a pre-made layout. So let's browse and see what some of those layouts will look like. So the layouts are basically what your website will look like. So you can look at, let's say, for instance, if you're doing an online store, it will give you layouts that work with something like WooCommerce that allow you to have an online store with products that are listed, much like the hardware store here, or like the furniture store, or your ebook. It gives you a little preview. So this this ice cream shop one, the preview hasn't loaded, but let's have a look. If I click on that, what the ice cream shop layout will look like. So there's an about page. There's a blog page, a contact page. They've actually pre-built most of the pages that you will need in your website. You can go then and view a live demo of the full site if you wish to. So you click View Live Demo and it'll open up in a separate tab a live demo of what the ice cream shop layout looks like. So you've got some really good stuff to choose from that lets you see, okay, this is really bright, really simple, really clean, and it's got a lot of images that you can just change over. So if we go, probably not that one's the one we want to use. So we go back to our layout details into the list of layouts. Let's scroll down, see if there's something that grabs us today as a layout for a particular one. So let's just say maybe essential oils. So if you're doing essential oils business, you're making your own essential oils, there's actually a pre-formatted website layout with a home page, a contact page, a blog page, an about page, a landing page for specials, an essential oil specific page, another recipe page, and a shop page that are already set up for you. So I'm going to pick up the home page and I'm going to use this layout. So let's see what that does. It's going to load that from Divi. And it's going to begin the process of showing me how I can then start to work with that particular layout to build my home page. Now, I'm sorry, this is running a little bit slow this morning because I'm actually running quite a few things through the system at the same time. So the internet connection is a little slower than what it normally would be. So I apologize for that. Here we go, nearly there. All right, 67%, 83%, nearly there. Just as a side, I'm actually away from home at the moment, so I don't have my best access to the internet. I've got the internet at my parents' place, so that background is completely fake, as you'd probably imagine. So now I've got this layout of this home page, which has got some amazing things in it. I can replace any of these. So I can overwrite anything that's in here. So for instance, if I wanted to say my winter sale is now a summer sale or a spring sale, I'll go spring sale and it updates. So if you double click on anything or go into the little gears that appear as you hover over an element, so we go 30% off is now going to be 25% off. So this is the image they've already made. So I can't really update that one unless I build my own PNG image with a background on it to do that. But I can then change the photo that's in here. So let's have a look. So it's just a regular photo or something. I can upload another photo if I like. So let's see what photos I've got available to upload. It's always dangerous, isn't it? Looking through photos, through someone's photos. I've got, let's see if I've got any sort of plain photos in there. I've got a lot of stuff, but not photos. I don't actually have a lot of photos on here. It'd be really good if I just find a photo that's going to work for me. I can find maybe this get known slice as a WebP image. So it probably won't load this one because WebP hasn't been installed into this particular website. WebP is a format of image. It's like a JPEG, but it's optimized for very, very super fast loading. It looks like it is. So this particular image, if I now insert it, is replacing the image that was there. And you can see how that works. So you can just go in there and replace those images with pretty much anything you like. You can upload or use existing images you've got there. Let's just upload another one. I surely have something else laying around that I can use. I can replace it with a logo. There we go, insert it, and there, that little logo to do with that is now replaced it. So anything in here from the titles, you hover on anything, and if it shows up with the little gears and a little thing around it, you can do something with it. Now, to understand how Divi works is to understand how the blue is a section. Within each section, you can have rows. So the row is green. So if I hover over something like that, surrounds that as green. And then you've got the module, which is a particular item like the photo or the text. So if I go out to this one, this level, which is the section, I can adjust things like the background of that section. So I want the background to be suddenly, I don't know, a different color, maybe orange. There you go. That background is now orange or red or green or purple. Purple's not too bad. And then I can play with those and tone down the colors just by changing the opacity of it. So it's now a light lavender rather than that super, super heavy purple. So that's now changed that. I can also update the background in this row to say maybe white. But the problem is, though, it's not really geared to show a background color in here because, look, it sort of pushes up against the sides here and doesn't sit quite right. So there are other myriad of design things you can do, such as design, play with the spacing. So then there is a bit of spacing all around that. So I can say the top has a 20 pixel space, the bottom has 20 pixels, the left and the right all have 20 pixels. And now it looks quite nice. It actually sits with a gap around it. So everything isn't just sort of back together really, really tightly. So the idea is to save this now and publish it, and that becomes my home page. Now, if you were going to be using Divi, and this wasn't necessarily a Divi instructional, but I'm sure people get very, very interested in when they start to see the buildability of the pages. I just made up a word then, buildability. So the ease of the ability to be able to build those pages. So if I was now building this, I can go, okay, now my page, I'll exit the visual builder, and that will take me then out to what the page looks like in a live environment. See, now I've got the purple background, the nice box around there, change the images to something for myself. And that's now what it looks like live. But unfortunately now, if I go to this up here, you normally go to the home page, right? Look what it does. It goes there. That's not what you want the home page to be. You want the home page to look like the one you had before. So what we're going to need to do is go into the back end of the website again to the menus. And we're going to create a menu that allows us to do this. Now, you may not remember to do all this because it is a little bit of working around, but I just go menu name, I call it maybe the main menu. It's my primary menu, and then I create menu. Now I've got a menu that's been created, so I'm replacing the menu that was already at the top there. And then I want to add my home page as the home page to the site. So the first thing that shows on there. That is step one. So if I go back to my front end of that website and let's refresh and go to that home page, we now see that home is there on its own. It's disappeared all those other things. Now I click on that, it gives me this. But if I click here, it still doesn't do that, right? That's because WordPress has to be told what page you're using or what you're using as the homepage on your website. So back in the back end, this one might be able to watch over and over again when you work with Divi with YouTube, the YouTube recording later on. Go to your settings, then reading on the bottom left, and you'll be given this. Your homepage displays what? Your latest post. No, that's not what we want. We want a static page, our actual homepage. So the homepage is going to be this home one that's now available because we saved and published it. So I save those changes now, and I go back to the back end, the front end, sorry. So this is the home page was as it was. If I refresh that now, it gives me now our pretty front end that we wanted. Now, if you wanted to then go and add a logo in there, that's something you can do from the back end as well. That's done from the Divi panel. So we go right to the left and all the way to the bottom to Divi, and we click on that. Then we've got the logo that we can upload there. So I can upload a logo that's going to fit what I'm trying to do. So let's see if I've got one in that's handy. What have I got available? No logos by the looks of it. Nothing that's really handy to be able to install in there. There we go, click start a logo 1. So that's going to load up a version of my logo that I can put in there. There you go. So set as the logo, save my changes. That's now saved. Now pop to there and refresh. I should now have a little logo up the top. Let's replace that one. Great, hey? So this is how you install and configure a WordPress website. Specifically with Divi, it's going to be a bit different with different kinds of themes that you use. This is just with my one. What I would also do is make sure that you've set yourself up within your web hosting to have things like backups to be run. Because trust me, like the client of mine this morning who went and deleted her homepage, it was very, very handy for us to be able to go in and just restore that homepage again. So if I go back to my services that I got with this particular company into my cPanel again, I've got the ability in my cPanel to set up things like how I want to do backups. So I can do a backup wizard. My backup wizard is to do a backup straight away, or if I want to do something which is more timed, that automatically happens. Acronis on Venture IP and many others. See, it's already got backups. So it runs a 5th of November. It's running multiple backups a day. It runs one every single hour of every single day, which means I don't have to go back to yesterday's backup. If I did a whole lot of work today, I could just go to the backup. So in the case, this is why you pay a little extra and use an Australian web host, is because they set this up for you in such a great way. This has been set up to back up every single hour, right back through to the 1st of October. So that's great. That means you've got that backup. So if I do something wrong, I can go back to 12:02 or 11:02 Eastern Daylight Time. That's what these times are set for, and go and restore those nicely. So it's coming on to about 1 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time and about 12 p.m. in Queensland time, which means that these are about an hour ago. So that one's due for another backup to run again at 1:02 Eastern Daylight Time. Isn't that great to know you've got that protection in there? That's why I use Venture IP. They just put in all these things that enable you to run your website really well. And if you want to check the health of your WordPress website, back in your Venture IP panel, you can go down to your WordPress toolkit again, and it will show you any problems you may have with that website. So one of the problems that may come up is that things are out of date and need to be installed. So let's go down to this guy. So there's 2 issues showing here under Clickstarter Australia with the one I just set up. There's an outdated plugin, and the redirect to HTTPS is currently turned off. So it's not saying, hey, you need to automatically go to HTTPS so that Google will actually rank you on mobile search queries. That's a whole other webinar on its own, because it can be a little bit hard to do, but I can fix these from here. Redirect to HTTPS, so turn on redirect to HTTPS, and it will automatically force that website then to run as HTTPS. So you see here, Clickstarter Australia, it's highlighted, it's sent off. Let's turn that on. So now my traffic is going to be protected, and anyone who enters the form, their information is encrypted and can't be then hijacked along the way. That's a really great thing to do. If I go back again, there was one other problem that it was showing, and that was an unupdated plugin. So let's have a look at what that is. Loading, loading, loading. One issue, outdated plugin. So it's going to tell me what that plugin is. So Akismet has actually been deleted, so it hasn't updated yet. So I'm going to check for updates, and it'll tell me, oh, that's all right. It's no longer there. You don't have to update this anymore. Turning, turning, turning. Now, one of the other things that installing Jetpack will allow me to do is that I will be able to remotely update the plugins that are out of date. So I'll be able to upgrade them and update them remotely just by clicking one button in my WordPress Jetpack account and do that remotely. Now, this probably won't be something you need to do because you're not running, 600 sites all at once. You're just running the one, but that's the ability for you to do that if you do grow and start developing lots of other websites that you're going to work. So now it's saying I've got this one problem in here to install the plugin update. So let's just run it just to shut it up and put it in there. So update, let's just put in the update. It wants to run the update. It doesn't even have that plugin in there. So it's just going to run it. And it just hasn't updated itself. So it says, yeah, it can't do it because it doesn't exist. So there's no update found because there's no actual plugin that's in there. So I've refreshed this again and it's telling me there's now nothing that's updated. So it just gives you a prompt. If once a month you want to go into your hosting account and just check to see that things are okay. I've got no issues in here now. I've got no other things that I need to set. I've now got a website that I can work on and build out to make however it looks. Other plugins you may want to consider sometimes are things like Gravity Forms, or it could be Contact Form 7 for forms, but Divi has its own form. So for instance, if I was to go in here, enable my visual builder and insert a form into this page, Divi has its own version of forms. And once it opens up, I can then go down to a point of the page where I want to install a form. Let's just say down towards the bottom here, install a new section, a regular row. Let's make it full width. And I want to install something like a EF. Where are we? Contact form, I think it's called. There. So that contact form then automatically puts in a form that I can then go name, email, message, or I can add a phone there if I wanted to do phone as well. So it puts a phone one in there. And then I can set all sorts of options for that. And then I can set options that are for this contact form, like which email address is it going to? Do I want to redirect things to another? So once they've completed the form, it goes to another page. Do I want to put at the moment, it's got a basic capture, which is 10+1, but I can turn that off and actually put in a proper Google reCAPTCHA in there as well. So you don't necessarily, with builders like Divi, there's another one called Elementor, another one called Beaver Builder, another one called Site Origin. They will all allow you to have a lot of these things built in, so you don't have to then go and get extra plugins and complicate your site. The more things you have to install in your site, the more chances are that you'll forget to do the updates and your site will become very, very unsecured and different bots will be able to break in and do nasty things to you. So that gives you an idea, I guess, now of what it looks like when you're installing WordPress on web hosting, some of the very basic things you might want to install. And a bit of bonus there, you got to look at the Divi web page builder that allows you to build pages as quickly and as easy as possible with lots of features built in and endless design functionality as well. So I hope you got something out of that. And I really do hope that you're able to go forward now and at least try that. Don't forget though, this particular webinar will be up on my Dante St. James YouTube channel, probably in the next hour. Business Station is usually pretty quick too, about an hour or two before they'll put theirs up too. So make sure you check on those two locations on YouTube if you'd like to watch any of that stuff again. And don't forget, for $44 as a small business, you will probably qualify in Queensland, Western Australia, or the Northern Territory to get 3 hours of one-to-one support, 7 hours of support altogether, with 4 hours of those going towards these great webinars and workshops as well. Some of them are in person in Brisbane and in Perth and in Darwin. Some of them are online workshops where you can learn things interactively and actually participate actively in this as well. So thank you so much for joining me this afternoon. I really hope it's this afternoon, just about to become this afternoon in Queensland, where I am at the moment. Still a little bit away in Western Australia and Northern Territory. But thank you again. And I really do hope to see you in the next one of these webinars.